What's your childhood mystery that you finally solved years later? I met my wife in college, and when we were dating she often mentioned that when she was a kid she had a play doctor's kit that was stolen from her house. She had some surgeries really young, and so her parents bought it for her to demystify the doctor's office. She'd use it all the time on her dad, poking and prodding him. One day I asked her about the robbery. Did they take everything? Jewelry? The TV? Other valuables? No. No. And no. It hit me. I asked, so someone broke into your house and only stole your doctor's kit, leaving anything worth fencing there? Yeah. Why? Did you ever consider your folks were tired of you using the kit on them all the time after you got better? Oh. Damn. We confirmed it with her dad later, but for 15 years she had believed some thief broke in and only stole her beloved doctor's kit. Edit. Spelling. I solved a family mystery for my mom. I wasn't allowed to play console video games during the week all the way until I was 18, but some nights I'd really be craving it, so I would noiselessly creep through my house into my basement where I could play video games in peace. But once every 30 times or so one of my parents would need something from the basement and I'd quickly turn off the TV monitor, hide in the guest room and pray they didn't turn on a light or notice the Xbox was on. One night I ducked into the guest room and hid behind the bed. To my horror my mom followed me into the room and turned on the lights. I was panicking, so when she started digging through the closet with her back to me I made a run for it. I nearly brushed her shirt, and if she'd seen me I'd probably have given her a heart attack. But I made it and kept going all the way to bed. About 5 years went by and my mom said something like, "You're such a quiet walker," and I told her it was because of my basement trips, thinking I had nothing to lose. My mom's face went kinda solemn, and when I explained she said, "So there really was someone down there?" And she explained that she remembered that exact night and the feeling that there was a ghost in the room. Over the next couple days she'd stare into space and just say, "I can't believe you were really there." She seemed to get over it, but she probably checks empty rooms closer now. One evening when camping, my brother caught a fish that we decided to keep alive in the cooler for some reason. Well, the next morning we ran out to see the fish and it had grown like 5 inches. We were so excited and didn't know how the fish grew that much overnight. Last year we brought it up and my dad said that he had got up that morning and seen the fish being taken by a raccoon, and that he spent the next hour or so frantically fishing for another one. He said he caught the new fish, the first one he was able to catch, just a few minutes before we got up. I had never questioned that the fish growing that much as I grew up. But after hearing what really happened I did feel like we probably should have wondered about that more. Who ate all the cherries in the cherry cake? I was blamed for this for years after someone picked out all of the cherries and ate them during a family Christmas party. 8 years later my little sister confessed to me that it had been her. When I was 10 my godfather gave me $20 as a Christmas gift. At the end of the dinner the money had disappeared. For years my parents blamed me for being irresponsible with my money. Years later we figured out, after she was caught stealing stuff from my aunt's house, that my cousin's fiancé at the time is a kleptomaniac. Turns out she was the one that stole the money. I visited my dad when I was 6 or 7 years old at the place where he worked. Or so I was told. I remember remarking at the time. And people laughed at me. Because I said it looked just like a prison. The people laughing were the guards, and I was indeed visiting my dad at Terminal Island Federal Correctional Institution where he was a federal inmate. My mom used to call us in for dinner by yelling out the back door from the kitchen. I was in middle school before I realized the screen door was actually called a screen door. My dad used to say he could stop the rain for a moment by snapping his fingers. He'd do it in the car. When it was pouring. I was so mesmerized, told all my friends about it. Well into late elementary school. I've since realized he'd snap as we drove underneath an overpass. I've always wanted to know what was behind the ATMs at a bank. How it worked and where did the money come from. I grew up and worked at a bank just to find out some fat dude had to squeeze behind the ATMs to refill it. Me. I was watching Star Trek TNG with my dad when someone told Riker to wash his back. When I asked my father why someone would say that to another person, he said, "So you can smell someone coming up behind you." It wasn't until years later that I understood how easy it was to hear "watch" as wash. And how committed my dad was to willfully deceiving his children for personal satisfaction. My dad is an ex-Catholic. And every night when he'd tuck me in until I left the house he'd say, "We love you. God bless you. Good night." And I was always wondering why. Since he had stopped going to church long ago. Fast forward to me being 28 years old and watching an old Bruce Springsteen concert together, one of his favorite artists. And Bruce says, "We love you. God bless you. Good night." At the end of his set. I turned my head towards my dad and asked if this is why he said that for years to me at night. He laughed and said, "I have no original material." When I was 4, I vividly remember getting into my mom's car and her telling me that our cat had died. She told me how she rushed him to the vet and he was shedding fur, something was seriously wrong. Despite her best efforts he died. I never knew why he died. And why it happened so suddenly. But I accepted that it happened. Fast forward about 15 years. I'm home from college for Christmas. On Christmas Eve, I'm out driving to the store with my dad and uncle. They are talking about the cat my parents got for Christmas one year, the cat mentioned above. My dad says, "Yeah. That thing was too aggressive. So I took it to a farm and gave it away." Normally, when the family pet dies, the parents lie to the kid and say it went to a farm upstate somewhere to ease the burden. Not my parents. They told me the horrifying truth, even though it wasn't. You know, true. The random claps at midnight in my house weren't from ghosts. And weren't claps either. We grew up poor and at the age of 10 my friends were all having these crazy birthday parties with petting zoos, bounce houses, clowns, etc. So my mother, who is very resourceful, decided I would have a sleepover for my 11th birthday. It was great and we were gonna make ice cream cones. So we got all the stuff out with my mom. And my mother opened up the box of cones. And they were all smashed up. She said that we weren't having regular ice cream. We were having Magic Castle sundaes, because the broken ice cream cones resembles the sections of a castle. We all thought this was great and we had them. When my friends went home, they asked their parents to make Magic Castle sundaes. 2 days ago I found out that my mother was getting the past sell-by foods behind the grocery store. They were not expired. Just past sell-by date. She had no idea that the cones were brown up until she opened them with us. She thought of the Magic Castle idea quickly. And we all loved it. Just goes to show how stupid kids are, lol. Not mine. But my husband's. I hope he doesn't see this BC, then my cover is blown. He said in middle school. There was a time that he'd get pulled out of class to shoot free throws in the gym. Only him. He didn't think this was strange. But didn't understand why he was the only one that got to do that. Turns out, his parents told his teachers he couldn't participate in sex ed. Haha. When I was in elementary school, I always wondered what the teacher's staff room was like. It seemed so mysterious, and I remember trying to get a peek anytime I walked by and the door would open. Later became a teacher and can fully confirm they're dull. Often toxic spaces full of cranky teachers complaining about students. I remember there was a time where I had to start asking to go play in the backyard, when I was about 6 to 7. Maybe 8. With my siblings, so she could supervise us. We never had to do this previously, so my siblings and I were very confused. And anytime we didn't ask she got us in big trouble. Turns out the neighbors were harboring a known pedophile in their house. And that's why mom got so upset with us going outside without asking. Edit. I have no idea if this man was on the run or not from the authorities. My mom probably had no idea either. Though if she knew he was on the run she for sure would have tipped the authorities. Mom did catch the man having sex with a teen on our front lawn. And called the police. Not sure what happened after that. Also, at this time my neighbors did not have a child of their own. I figured out my dad wasn't on a business trip in 2005. He was at my uncle's wedding and didn't want to take me all the way there because it was in Ireland and he knew I'd want to go if he told me. In hindsight, I probably should have picked up on the lie. My dad is a school custodian. Edit. People seem very curious about why he didn't take me. I'd been to Ireland before as my dad is from Dublin. I was a bad flyer as a kid because I'd get wicked ear infections and he only left for 4 days, so he didn't think it was worth it. Also a school custodian is, at least here in NYC public schools, kind of the manager of the janitorial staff. As you've probably gathered, I was not the sharpest kid. Also I did eventually get to go to a wedding in Ireland in 2018, so I guess that's some redemption tears of joy. I remember being about 8. and in the car with my dad. I was in the front seat and we were driving somewhere. And this song came on the radio. He cranked it and said something about it being the best guitar playing ever. He really jammed out. Which was really uncharacteristic because he was usually so stoic. It was the only time I heard the song. And he died before I could ever ask him what song it was. When I asked around, no one knew WTF I was talking about or what song I was thinking of. So I had this melody in my head for years. But how do you look up a song that has no lyrics? So for years and years, this song stayed on the back burner in my brain. I was afraid to forget it. Somehow this story pops up when I'm like 26 or so. Chatting with my husband and we searched YouTube for best guitar songs. After about 15 minutes, we find it. Cliffs of Dover was the song that I'd burned into my brain on repeat for 16 years. Now I jam out to it with my kids. Edit. Thank you so much for the kind words and awards. I'm kinda speechless at how big this post got. But thank you. I had meningitis when I was 2 years old. And my baby brother had it also and he died. I had the viral form. He had the bacterial form. I grew up thinking I had it first and always felt like I gave it to him and was the reason he died. I know. But you can't help what you think. Especially when you're a kid. It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that he actually had it before me. I don't know why no one had ever told me that before. Except maybe they didn't because they weren't aware that I always harbored this guilt about it since I kept everything inside. Not one person had ever mentioned to me that he had died before I got it. Or maybe I was in the hospital when he died. That part still isn't clear to me. I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks. So it could have been before or during my hospital stay. For over 20 years I had a very distinct memory of seeing this movie with my dad around the holidays in our living room. It was a black and white movie. But I had a vivid memory of only this one specific scene. Elle was probably about 6 or 7 when I watched it with him. It bugged me for the longest time. I would think about it periodically for years because I remembered it being so cool. I just wanted to know what movie it was so I could check it out as an adult. Then one day, I can't even remember where, but someone online somewhere had described this movie and mentioned the name and it sounded really similar to the one I remembered. I looked it up on YouTube and it turns out the movie was Babes in Toyland, March of the Wooden Soldiers. The scene I remembered so vividly was all of the soldiers marching out of the toy shop. Figuring this out was literally one of the most satisfying things I've ever felt in my life. I used to go to our local YMCA after school and during the summer when I was a kid. We went swimming in the pool almost every day and being the curious kid I was, I always wondered what was behind the caution doors with the weird triangle markings. Fast forward 8 years and I'm now working at that YMCA as a lifeguard. And behind the doors? Old, smelly pool chemical testing rooms. Very anticlimactic. John Travolta was actually John Travolta, which really made a lot more sense. When I was really young, me and my siblings would play in my grandparents' yard. My grandfather would tell us to stay away from the skunk hole at the edge of the yard. We lived in South Texas, so this wasn't something out of the ordinary. And we just avoided it like any other animal home. Years later it dawned on me. It was actually the septic tank access. When I was a kid in the 70s my parents worked in Canada's Arctic. But we're from Nova Scotia. I had a pet mouse. Pixie. Pixie died the night before our family flew home to Nova Scotia for summer vacation. It was many years later before I realized that probably wasn't a sad coincidence. Reverse of this, as a kid, my dad would call me from the other side of the house to bring him something to drink from the kitchen. He always drank from a straw in about first grade. I started getting annoyed at this, so I started poking a tiny hole in his straw as my own little vengeance. I didn't come clean about this until I was like 22 years old. The look on his face was priceless. It's like he instantly snapped back to then and knew exactly what I was talking about and just said, "Son of a ... You didn't you?" He just thought we bought cheap straws. How Sinterklaas made the peppernoten fall through the ceiling. I quickly discovered Santa wasn't real when I was a kid. But I was certain that the Dutch version, Sinterklaas, was real because in December, peppernoten, tiny Dutch cookies, would suddenly rain down on me. And I thought Sinterklaas was on the roof dropping it through the ceiling. I was so convinced about this that I bragged to the kids in my class that my Santa was real and theirs was fake. But the Dutch Santa only visits Dutch kids in America. Apparently my mom would carry handfuls of peppernoten in her pockets, and when I wasn't expecting it, she would throw it up in the air above me. I don't know how I didn't realize what was going on at the time. The first year I was in on the secret and I watched my mom throw peppernoten on my brother. It seemed so obvious. Edit. Yes. I know that Sinterklaas isn't exactly Dutch Santa, and I know about calling them kruidnoten versus peppernoten. Didn't care to be technically accurate because I didn't know this would blow up. Thanks for the awards. My dad used to occasionally burst out with this one line of a song. Quote, ... said Barnacle Bill the Sailor. Only ever that line. When I was 6 or so I asked him why, and he said it was an old drinking song that was absolutely filthy and I was too young to hear the rest of it. This continued once or twice a year until I was 18. I told him I was an adult now and he could tell me the rest of the song. I distinctly remember him looking up from the newspaper, sighing and folding it, then going, "The truth is I can never remember the rest of the song." And then went right back to reading the newspaper. In kindergarten I had a guinea pig that turned into many guinea pigs after I babysat the class guinea pig for Xmas break. Parents were thrilled. Anyway, my teacher took the entire family back to her house and was supposed to sell them. And I would get my original guinea pig back. They never returned, and my parents told me they all got sold together as one big happy family. I didn't find out until I was maybe 25 that a coyote actually got into the cage and they all got eaten together as one big happy family. This is the way. The reason my aunt punched her husband at the pool during a huge family vacation. It was because she found out that the long-distance charges to the hotel room they shared had a ton of calls to a woman he was known to think was swell. I have these pale white flecks in the center of my front teeth, adult said. Everybody I meet, upon seeing my smile for the first time up close, remark on it. I found out about 2 years ago that it's caused by consuming above a certain amount of fluoride before your adult teeth set in. It's called dental fluorosis. As a kid, I used to swallow toothpaste rather than spit it out. Plus our water is fluoridated. So I suppose that's how I got to consuming that much fluoride. P.S. Thanks for the silver. P.P.S. Thanks for the awards. When I was like 8 or so, I answered our house phone. And it was a man who asked to speak to my mom. Didn't ask for her by name. Said, "Could I speak to your mom? Please?" I asked who it was and he said, "It's Santa Claus." I was so excited and ran to my mom, and I was telling all my friends for days that Santa Claus had called my house. This led me to believe in Santa for a few years longer than most kids normally do. I was heartbroken when I found out that Santa wasn't real. Years and years later I remembered to ask my mom who had called that day and said they were Santa Claus. It was our reverend. And my mom was a deacon. He had known me for years, so recognized my voice when I answered and knew what age I was. It had never occurred to me. I begged my parent to let me attend regular school when I reached high school age. Homeschooled. They kept saying my math programs didn't line up right and I might get stuck an extra year if I tried to go. But we could think about it. I was thinking about it the other day and I was like, well shit, pretty sure it was not completely true and they just didn't want me going to normal school. I don't know why I just realized this. Edit. I'm so thankful for everyone's replies. Seems like there's a lot of people with similar experiences out there. I had nightmares for years. Literally every dream I had was where my older sister was a robot and trying to kill me. She would come in the form of a tank. Things that looked like Transformers. Metallic spider. Had a lot of knives and shit on her. Every single metallic robot you can imagine with my sister's face on it. Had only these dreams for all of elementary school. It was solved when I brought it up at 17. I was born super early. I mean super early. 4 months. I was born with so many issues and complications. After I was born I spent 5 months in the NICU, where I received a lot of attention from doctors. Had multiple surgeries and had a feeding tube put in me. My mom was sad that I couldn't meet my sister and she couldn't meet me, she was 4 at the time. So she put a picture of my sister's face above me in my incubator thing so I could see my sister. Cute idea. But this ended up causing my brain to put together the only 2 things I knew. Surgical tools and scary hospital equipment with my sister's face. It took us so long to figure out what the hell these nightmares meant. When I was 12 or 13, I had a horrifying experience one night. I woke up, completely awake, not dreaming, and felt like I was encased in transparent concrete. I could only move my eyes. And even though I was breathing, I couldn't control it. Everything was bizarre, and I could sense a malevolent presence in the corner of my room. But I couldn't turn to look at it. This went on for what felt like hours. I was drenched in sweat, and felt like I was suffocating. Because my adrenaline had kicked in big time, but I couldn't increase my respiration. Finally, after trying to scream 1,000 times, I was finally able to get a squeak out. I kept going and going until I was screaming at the top of my lungs. But my family didn't come check on me. After another 1,000 tries, I was able to start barely moving. I finally broke out of the encasement and was able to move. And realized what I thought was my screaming was a barely audible whisper. I didn't wake my family because I had nothing to tell them that wouldn't be dismissed as a bad dream. I didn't go back to sleep that night. Z and I had horrific insomnia for decades. Until ... In my 40s, I saw a documentary about people who said they'd been abducted by UFOs. It was a dry, fact-based documentary, and they had experts on explaining that many such abductees were actually experiencing something called sleep paralysis. My jaw hung open. I called my wife in, as I had told her about my supernatural experience. And we listened as these scientists described my experience exactly. Here, after decades, was the clinical description that, literally, changed my life. My sleep began returning to normal. And my mental health improved. TLDR. I had an episode of sleep paralysis when I was a tween. In the before times when there was no internet. And my traumatic mystery and insomnia had persisted until I randomly learned about sleep paralysis from a UFO documentary in my 40s. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.